Welcome to the Good Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Talley, mama, licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, and embodiment coach. Here we dive deep into the realms of energy, consciousness, awareness, empowerment, and personal transformation to help you create a more vibrant and juicy life. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Good Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Talley. Today is going to be an interesting episode because I have been feeling called so strongly to talk to you about my story and about my capital T trauma and how it informs what I do now. And I think giving you this background will help you. That's the whole point of sharing, is to show you what's possible. And so I want to start this episode by saying, with all the love in my heart, that this is a trigger warning, that we're going to talk about some really intense stuff. We're going to talk about rape. We're going to talk about sexual assault. We're going to talk about abuse. And if you are a person who gets triggered by those types of conversations, I would say that now is a good place for you to stop. So let's all rewind ourselves to the year 2010. So at this time, I was in Buffalo, doing my undergraduate at the University at Buffalo, and I would come home every summer and work at the Naked Turtle, and I worked at the Naked Turtle for like 8 years, 7 years, something like that. I came home for the summer to work, and I was kind of dating my husband. Well, he wasn't my husband at the time. He was a new man to me. And I was contacted by a friend of mine who was in town, and he was in the military. So he would get deployed and he lived away. So he wanted to connect. And so I had this really weird conversation with he wasn't even my boyfriend. It was just, he was the person that I was talking to. And I was like, hey, this isn't like a romantic thing. My friend wants to see me. I'm thinking about going over just to say hey. And I just felt funny about it. So I just wanted to talk to you about it. And he was like, oh my God, no, it's your friend. Absolutely. Like, he and I weren't officially dating at that time. And so I ended up going over to the house, and things went wrong pretty fast. I was picked up and put over the shoulder of my friend. I was thrown down on a bed. I was undressed, and I was abused. At the time, I was shocked. And I knew a lot about trauma responses. And I knew about fight or flight, but I didn't know about freeze. And see, this is where it gets tough, because I was raised by an extremely strong woman. Well, my parents, both of them, are strong people, but there's always been really strong women in my life. And my mom at the time was working at the New York State Police as a zone sergeant. And so she was extremely powerful to me. I look up to her. And so what she always said to me is that you teach people how to treat you. And so when my trauma response was to freeze, and I mean two things. One, freeze. Second, dissociate. So when I say dissociate, what happened was I was outside of my body, looking down at myself, being raped on a bed. And I was frozen in time and space. I can't even really tell you how long. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours that I was stuck. And that has been a major piece of my own puzzle to work through, of, well, what does that say about me? What does that say about me? That I let him do that to me. And eventually I came to, and I came back to my body, and I did end up pushing him off. I ran naked with my clothes outside into my car, and I got into my car completely naked. And he chased me. And I remember locking the door. At this time, all the adrenaline had kicked in. And I started my car, and I blitzed it out of there. And I was just circling and circling. And I was circling in the downtown area of my hometown. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, I can't go home. I can't face my mother. I can't let anybody see me like this. So I ended up at Brian's house. His name's Brian. And I ended up getting dressed in my car, and I ran up the stairs, and I burst through the door. And the first thing that he said to me is, I thought somebody died. And to that I say, well, didn't they? Because at that time, I felt like a piece of me did die. And it was a spiral. Like, that night he held me, and he basically said, I'm here for you, whatever you want to do. Because what were my choices? Well, I could go to the hospital, I could go to the police, I could call my mother. But even though I wasn't frozen, like in the active trauma, I was still frozen in myself. And all I wanted was it to go away. And so I ended up deciding that I'm not going to go, and I'm not going to go in under the fluorescent lights and have a rape kit done and do the whole thing. And so the next day, which I stayed overnight at Brian's house, I came home and I told my mother what happened. And my mother gave me probably the best gift that she could have given me, which was to say, you had your power stripped away from you once, and I'm not going to do it again. So you are going to decide what it is that you would like to do. If you want to go in. And she had all the information. Like, she was a support person. She knew what would happen if I made that decision. She walked me through the scenarios, and I decided essentially that I didn't want to report it. And so from there, I was in a really, really dark place. And I decided that I should go and I should get another check done, even though I had just had my annual exam and I had just had an STD check done at that annual exam. So I called the gynecologist's office and I made an appointment with whoever provider could see me, because it was so short notice. I couldn't get my provider. And I went in for that appointment, and the provider came in and she said, well, you were just here 2 months ago. What are you doing here? And I said, well, I was raped 2 days ago, and I really would like to have another exam done, and I would like to have an STD check. And the first thing that she said to me was, well, what were you wearing? And I was dumbfounded by that too. I was like, what was I wearing? I was so dumbfounded that I literally think I answered her. I was like, I was wearing a tank top and jeans. And she said, well, was there alcohol involved? And I said, no, there wasn't. And so yes, being raped, being choked, being assaulted was horrific. But actually being treated the way that this nurse practitioner treated me was probably even the bigger trauma to me. Because here is somebody that is supposed to be there for me in a way that is supportive, in a way that is trauma informed, in a way that is conducive to my own healing. And it just went so bad. And from that moment, that was actually the moment, the catalyst moment to realizing that my mission in life and my mission in my work is to hold sacred, trauma-informed space for anybody who is going through tough times, for anybody who is in a healing journey, for anybody. Because it's not okay to be treated like that. It's not okay. And so from that point back in 2010, I spiraled down pretty hard. I was extremely depressed. I had to stop working. I was having suicidal ideation where I thought, I don't think I really want to be here. I think I might not want to be here, actually. And slowly things started to improve when I started to see a therapist, somebody who works actually very similarly to my business partner, Anna Dixon. So she does EMDR and internal family systems, which is specific. It's trauma therapy. And so when I first started therapy, I had such aversion to myself. Like I couldn't even turn towards myself even a millimeter. The pain and the shame and the hurt was crushing. And through the process of being in therapy for a really long time, actually, and I'm still in therapy, I started to unpack a lot of these different things. And so the first one is there's four main responses to trauma: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fight or flight, we all kind of understand. Fight, you fight your attacker off. Flight, you leave. And your nervous system kind of kicks up and it's like, running from a bear, right? Freeze, exactly what happened to me, is you stop. Everything stops. You're not there anymore. You're there, but you're not there. And fawn is people pleasing, where you kind of go along with what's going on to make everything more comfortable, basically, for like the attacker or the person who's perpetrating the trauma. And I learned through therapy that even though freeze was not my ideal response that I wish that I would have had, freeze actually saved my life because I was being choked hard. My airways were being squeezed. My head and face was being pulled and yanked, and had I tried to fight him off, he could have choked me out. And so it wasn't until understanding that these responses are there to protect us. These responses are what our body, our brain naturally do in order to preserve us. And so if you are a person who has had a trauma occur to you and you were not happy with the response of your body, I see you, 1. And 2, your body did what it needed to do to survive. And so to that, I say, fuck yeah, absolutely. That is amazing, actually. So that for me was a huge reframe. And, it's interesting because even though it's been 15 years, I still have moments where freeze is relevant to me. And I'm going to give you an example. So sometimes when I am scrolling on social media, I am almost like I'm not here. I have those moments of freeze where I come back to my body and it's been hours sometimes. And that produces me to feel like I went back there, like I wasn't here. And so even though in trauma, we wish for it to be over. That's what I would say. I said, I just want to get over it. I want to be done with this. I want to get over it. And the fact of the matter is, we don't necessarily get over it. But what we do is we have, one, lots of tools in place when triggers happen. And two, we can see it coming. We can see certain things from afar after years of work on this. And so it doesn't ever actually really go away necessarily. However, from my own experience, I can say that I am a very different person from what happened. And I've learned that actually, and this is going to sound fucked up to anybody who is going through active trauma, one day you might actually just be grateful that you went through that. Now, I'm not saying that whatever happened to you was a good thing, or that it wasn't wrong, or that it was warranted. No, that's not what I'm saying. What happened to me was fucked up. Being raped is fucked up. But without that experience, I wouldn't have the perspective. I wouldn't have the understanding. I wouldn't have the ability to know what to say or to hold safe space. Now, I'm not saying that if you're a person who's never had any type of trauma with a capital T, that you can't learn how to hold safe space. So that's important to say. Actually, when I was going through all of this, I came up with a training, and I taught that training at my acupuncture school to acupuncture students who didn't know what to say when somebody came in who had sexual trauma. And so I'm actually planning on doing an episode on what you do say and what you don't say and how you help and how you hurt on the docket. But without that trauma, I wouldn't be who I am today. So the night that this all occurred to me, and I said this at a speech that I did for an event that we held in Plattsburgh called Evening of Healing, and I'll say it again because it still remains true. The night that I was raped, I shattered. I shattered like glass. Like I shattered into a million pieces. But over the years, I've put those pieces back together like a mosaic. And the substance that weaves that mosaic together is strong. That substance is sturdy. It's strong. It's resilient. It knows. And so I can't pretend like I'm the same person that I was 15 years ago, because I'm not. I am a 2.0 version of that girl. And I have feelings and thoughts that actually I'm really grateful that I didn't kill myself. Just know the only thing constant in life is change. If you're going through hell, just know that it will change. And that you sometimes have to walk through the dark to get to the light. I had such aversion to myself, to my body. I was so pissed off and devastated at my body that I was disconnected. And I stayed disconnected for a while. My body was so sensitive to touch after being raped that when we were learning acupuncture, and there's a bunch of points in the neck and the throat area, I couldn't even, nobody could touch me in that place. Like I couldn't even, the level of panic and crushing fear that I had, if anybody touched me in the throat or even got close to me in that region, was horrific. Through time and through self-work, that is no longer the case anymore. And so that's what I mean about it. Just many of the things that feel extremely heightened actually get kind of dulled out in a way where it doesn't quite hurt as much as it did. And I remember being terrified about sex because in my brain, somehow, I made the correlation that sex equals rape. I remember being absolutely petrified when I had decided that I actually wanted to be intimate with my partner, who is now my husband. And I remember having this conversation of being like, I'm really scared, but I want this. And I remember him saying, it's okay. Like, we're going to figure this out. Let's go really slow. Let's be really slow. And let's check in with each other. After that experience, I remember it was like a holy experience. I remember being like, how could I mistake it? I couldn't mistake it. How could I think how could I think sex is rape? So you can turn your pain into purpose. That is the main reason why my whole mission in my life is to cultivate safe space for healing and fight to be a safe person to anybody who is processing trauma or is healing or has gone through really intense shit. Even if you're a person who hasn't gone through any of this, you would find that the care that you receive is across the board the same. And so for any of the current patients that I have right now who wonder, why does she ask me permission every single time? I've been a patient here for years. Why does she need to ask me that? Well, consent is something that is skirted over in a lot of Western medicine practices. Like my best example is like at the gynecologist, when the speculum gets inserted before you know the exam's gonna start. Like all you'd really have to say is it okay if I start your exam? Is it okay if I insert this speculum into your vagina? And so I will always say, is it okay if I start acupuncture? Is it okay if I start cupping? Is it okay if I touch you? I will always say that every time, no matter what. You're the authority of your body. You're the authority of your body. And what you say goes. And so if it's ever a no in any way, shape, or form, then it's a no. Like, I don't care if I was wearing nipple tassels and crotchless panties. I was screaming no. It was a no. Even if you're thinking no and you can't say no, it's still a no, right? So the conditioning and the years and years of separation from our bodies and this idea that our bodies aren't sacred and you're in this kind of cattle line when you're going to certain appointments like the gynecologist and it's like, oh, this is just how we do it here. This is just what it is. No, you should ask for consent all the time. When a woman's giving birth in the hospital and you have to do something to help her and her baby, you should ask for consent, right? Consent. Super, super important in all ways, shapes, or forms, especially in a medical setting. You know, at that evening of healing, I had somebody ask me in the Q&A, don't you wish that you could tell him, that you could call him up and say, look at me now. Look all at what I've done. And to that I say, no. Because it's about me, it's not about him. None of this is about him. But I'll never forget one of the worst days of my life was the day that I found out that he's actually raped other women after me. That was probably the toughest thing that I could have heard. And feeling so at fault for that. And thinking, well, what if I had reported? Could I have stopped him? Was that my fault? And I've come to the other side of that. I firmly believe this in my heart. that once you're a rapist, you're always a rapist. Those tendencies will always be there. And I have to say that I still feel torn up about that at times. And I still have to work through feeling like it's my fault. Because I felt like it was my fault even from the very beginning. Because it's like, well, you let this happen to you. You could have done so many different things to make this, to have changed the outcome. And at the time, I wasn't thinking, yeah, like die. So the real takeaway here is you can heal. When you work to be back with your body, there's a fuckload of information that comes through. Because I was cut off from my body for so many years. And I was having panic attacks and I was spiraling. And I also was very heavily drinking and using drugs. It took a lot of work for me to be with myself again. And I call that getting woke. That's basically what happened, is I started to kind of wake up. Once you get woke, you can't really go back. And I learned the process of how to come back to yourself. And what I'll say is coming back to yourself is actually the first step in the healing process. Because there's a lot of information that comes through and you can't just guess at that information. You have to actually know it in your body. And if anybody has ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is actually a fucking great book. Love that book. Our body holds on to trauma. I could do talk therapy to death, but unless I was actually moving through that through my body, yes, with the help of therapy, but with the help of other things like acupuncture, exercise, meditation, that I was able to actually be with myself. And becoming woke and waking up is how you live in the present moment. It's how you navigate. It's how you know what's really true for you. And without going through this process, I may always have been very cut off from myself. And who actually knows? But I firmly believe that everything happens in the way that it needs to. And I do believe in divine timing. And I do think that there are no coincidences or mistakes in this life. And so everything that has happened with purpose. This is why I want to help others heal. This is why healing is important to me. And so with being back in touch with my body, I realized that my body is actually an amazing tool in order for me to do my work. So what does that mean? It means that through the work of coming back to myself, I can actually use my own intuition. I can use my sense-felt practices, better my work by being with myself in real time and in patient sessions. And so I have extremely strong clinical training, didactic training, and I was trained at a school that was heavily trained biomedicine. And that's all fine and good, but you miss the forest through the trees if you don't actually be in touch with your intuition. And so sometimes I have a full list of points and a point prescription that I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into the room and I'm going to needle this, and this. And so I walk into that room and actually what comes up for me might be different than what's on that piece of paper. And so I actually, through this process, have the ability to attune to what's going on, to attune to the patient, and to attune to what is called for. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. From a clinical perspective, sometimes it doesn't make sense. I have those times where I'll be like, well, this point really, really wants to be needled right now. I can literally feel that in my body. But my brain says, well, that doesn't make any sense. That point isn't for the chief complaint of why this patient's here. And so over time, what I realized is trusting the intuition amplifies the whole treatment. And it doesn't actually matter what you think you know in your head. What does matter is what your tissues of your body actually know. And every single time that I listen to that intuition, it produces a great result. And I know that from follow-up. And many of these things is pertinent to the trauma, is pertinent to my work, is like I couldn't be the practitioner that I am today without that. And I couldn't be spreading my mission online in front of shitloads of people that I don't actually know, but that I want to know. I couldn't have the balls to sit here and talk to you on this microphone and to be really brave in sharing what happened to me and why it informs what my work is and what I'm doing now without going through it. And so what I'm essentially saying to you is there will be a time where you are grateful, where you can now connect those dots and have gratitude for that process. It doesn't mean what happened to you was a good thing. And when I was raped, the language to me was really important. So what I realize is that people throw that term around a lot when they don't actually mean raped. I.e., I remember going to a test and one of my classmates at the time was like, wow, that test just raped me. And I was like, wow, that is not the meaning of the word, and we should not be saying it like that. And I would get so livid. I still find myself frustrated with the fact that you can't actually say the word rape online, on social media. I can understand it on the one hand. They don't want anybody to be using it improperly online. But also, you can't actually tell a story because to me, the language is important. I wasn't sexually assaulted. I was raped. That's important to me to say out loud. And so now to think about having to, when I'm posting these like highlight reels and all that, I have to censor it out. That pisses me off. Because I want survivors. And that's the thing. You're not a victim, you're a survivor. I want survivors to be able to tell their stories and say the fucking words. Say the words. The words are important to say out loud. And so multiple different healing experiences for me over time has produced me, the person who is sitting here in front of this microphone telling you that it's possible for you, especially if you have gone through something significant. It's possible for you to heal, even if you feel crushed. And I want to say that for anybody who heard me in the beginning when I was talking about the trigger warning and thought to themselves, oof, I should probably X out of this, and you're here right now listening, I think you're fucking brave. And there's a reason why you're still listening. Today I don't have any cutesy little tips or tricks or a little positive Polly jingle to send you off. All I want to say is if you're going through hell, keep on going. I think you're brave. I think some of our hardest times in our life actually are moments that define who we are, what we stand for, and where we're going in our life. It doesn't diminish how hard those experiences are, but they are catalysts to the 2.0 version of you. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you in the next episode.